Welcome to part 3 of what is Classical Lutheran Education. I'm Pastor Paul Cain from Sheridan, Wyoming. Among my vocations, I'm a son, I'm a brother, I'm a husband, a pastor, a headmaster, education exec, NLSA commissioner, and now Wyoming District Secretary. So I've got a lot of things to spend time on. But this is really one of my joys, classical Lutheran education. That said, I have freely borrowed from a whole bunch of people. Very few of the ideas in this part of the presentation, which we don't have enough time for, are my own. I've borrowed from everybody, without apology. I consider that very classical, but I do try to attribute my sources, and here are many of them, including Dr. Tallman for teaching this particular session in recent years. I'm still tweaking. I was the PowerPoints just before this began. Where do we go from here? I overheard yesterday someone talking about their experience of consulting with a school that wished to convert to classical Lutheran education. And the administrator said, okay, tell me what we need to change for this fall and I'll get right on it. That's not how any of this works. Where do we go from here? I encourage you to keep in contact with those of us in the CCLE. Not just the board, but especially the board. The people that you've met. After that, teach what you know. Learn more, then teach that. Become or remain a lifelong learner as a classical Lutheran educator. We're all still learning. I need to ask Dr. Veith which work of Boethius he was quoting this morning. I haven't read much of that fellow, other than what Dr. Veith and others have quoted. Visit a classical Lutheran school. We love visitors. We've even had faculty exchange programs between the Montana and Wyoming districts where we go and freely reappropriate ideas from one another. Montana has a speech meet in Billings with both of the Lutheran schools, and they've invited others from the region. One of the schools in Casper, Wyoming had a field day. There was a cannon. I got to play taps. That was awesome. Visit, ask questions, even volunteer in the classroom if you are so able. Regularly correspond with administrators and teachers of an accredited classical Lutheran school, board members, and fellow homeschool families. If you don't know about the Yahoo email list for homeschool families or the Facebook page, the CCLE page, the Friends of the CCLE page, there's lots of ways to keep in contact. And you can even write this down, webmaster@ccle.org. I'll be the one answering that email or forwarding it on to you so you do get an answer. Seek school accreditation or seek educator certification or administrator certification. We say it this way so it's open to everyone, whether you have a school or a homeschool. How do I teach? Make your learning goals measurable, achievable, and practical. Tell yourselves and your students what your outcomes and objectives are. This one comes from Wisdom and Eloquence. Have a 12 to K focus instead of a K to 12 focus. Know where you're going. Don't just teach to the test, but know where you're going for the whole academic endeavor. True liberal arts education teaches not only the how and the what, but also the why and the wherefore. You'll hear a lot of those reporter questions throughout the rest of those slides. I'm borrowing them from Melanchthon as well. The liberal arts are the arts of a free person. I call them the arts of freedom. This comes from Dr. Tallman, emphasizing good mental habits. And I'm paraphrasing Luther here on the first one. Mastering content is certainly fine outward training, but one is truly well prepared if they have good study skills and good mental habits. Education is not always about test taking. Sayers stresses the difference between subject matter and tools of learning. So does Aristotle. I wonder where she borrowed that from. The grammar stage emphasizes knowledge acquisition, mastery of content, memorization. And you will hear from me, you will hear from Dr. Tallman and others that dialectic and rhetoric are practically two sides of the same coin. It's really hard to separate the two because they integrate so well together. Please note that Sayers' view of grammar, logic, and rhetoric as developmental stages is helpful, but you as the educator always have grammar, logic, and rhetoric as tools in your toolbox, even when students are only in the grammar so-called level. Theory and practice together. You can teach in parallel in this way. Lay down some theory, give some nuts and bolts, have the students practice. And have you ever considered practicing on one another as fellow parents and teachers? Repeat this process, add new theoretical insights, add new skills, raise the bar, and then another graded assignment, just to see how things are progressing. Dr. Tallman loves the phrase that could be translated in English, much, not merely more. It's not just a motto for classical education, but also for life. There's still room in his Tuesdays with Tallman class. We met in person in a hotel lobby, and, well, we had a lot of fun. You can catch up by watching the archived video. It's amazing how little we read, even when it comes to footnotes, right, fellow classmate? And then we talk for the rest of the hour about things, and then we can understand everything in the assigned readings based on just that little tidbit. Deep learning takes time and must be circumscribed, paced. I asked Dr. Tallman for a personal course in rhetoric. Be careful what you ask for. It blew my book budget for 2 years. And I've bought 10 books since I've been here. There was even a used copy of Dr. Kopp's Euripides for sale, just one, on Amazon, in very good condition. I care about that sort of thing. Quality of learning opportunities are what we should focus on, those that foster both intellectual curiosity and integrity, and we prioritize them over quantity of information and rigor. I honestly feel bad not getting all of my PowerPoint slides done, but I'd rather not feed you from a fire hose. The seminary equivalent of this is a homiletics prof teaching us, don't preach the whole counsel of God in your first sermon. It's really easy to do, or to try. Love of learning will not result from a too rigorous curriculum. My school, when I first arrived there, was accused of being militaristic. My defense was, nuh-uh. The uniforms would be way different. Connect concepts to one another. I love integrating knowledge, especially connecting to something that I've already learned that leads to a new rabbit hole. This is especially fun in Bible study, and your students will also appreciate. We have integrated language arts in our school. Latin and English from kindergarten up. Even chapel has some Latin. More on that now. Here you go. Ein fester Burg ist unser Gott. Who for chapel. It should be led by your pastor. In attendance, everybody, including volunteers. Maybe some folks that because they're a low person on the totem pole, they weren't able to make it to Sunday Divine Service. I still wish to serve them. And we have guest homeschool families in our congregation with the Classical Lutheran School. Where? In your church. Sit where you sit for church. The pews. Have the pastor use the chancel, as on Sunday. This is a wonderful opportunity to teach about vestments. Cassock and surplice and stole and pectoral cross and alb and stole and chasuble, if you're blessed to have divine service for a chapel. Our children love to see embroidered copes. That's the cape-looking thing that you wear for a festive non-communion service that makes you look like a hobbit if you're my height. What? The grammar of the Christian faith. The historic liturgy of the Christian faith. You do not have to lower your standards for chapel. Faithful hymnody and song from every time and place. We regularly use Lutheran Service Book and Luther's Small Catechism, and I do have a hymnal supplement, and I intend to explain more about that. Why do we do this? Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise that it may go well with you and that you may live long in the land. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. Ephesians 6. We are partners with parents in catechesis. There's one particular section of Luther's Small Catechism that is virtually ignored, as the head of the household should teach it in a simple way to his family. Your translation may vary, but I try to lay that out, especially if I'm catechizing an adult or someone's wife. When? Have chapel often. We finally made it at Sheridan. 5 days a week. Imagine the joy. We get to have Sunday, Wednesday night, chapel 5 days a week, and then between the three nursing homes and the county jail, I average a sermon a day, plus what Pastor Castellero gets to do. That really helps your preaching over time. Have it often. Say you have chapel once a week right now. Add a second day. In another year, add another day. Does this take time? Yes, it takes time. Is this in addition to your religion curriculum? Yes, it is. 20 to 30 minutes is possible. Not for the sermon, brothers. That's for the whole thing. But it is possible to do. How? That's what this next segment of the presentation is about. Our mother school in the Wyoming district had matins every day except for Wednesdays when they did Divine Service Setting 3, and they enjoyed all the benefits of an all-Lutheran, all-LCMS faculty. They observed the additional days that show up during the course of a school year, and they had different hymns every day. At Martin Luther Grammar School, here is our newly revised model after our accreditation renewal, with some advice from my young brother in office, and after we've done 5 days a week for an entire school year. We're going to start Monday with morning prayer, another musical setting of matins, if it's new to you. We use an Old Testament lesson, or the reading from Acts, depending on which lectionary gets used. And I teach the Venite first. There are hymn options for canticles, but I like the built-in ones there, the Benedictus. One of the new editions of Luther's work says we need to sing the Benedictus more, but he doesn't call it the Benedictus. He calls it, Blessed be the Lord, the God of Israel. We need to sing that more. Okay? I'll take on that dare. And we introduced the MLGS, Martin Luther Grammar School, Hymn of the Week. We go through it stanza by stanza, line by line. Repeat after me. I'll get a starting pitch from Mrs. Schumann. She's still playing, even though we have a baby grand piano now. After 64 years of marriage, she's still volunteering at the school. And then she plays with the phrase while the children sing. Call and response. It works great, especially if you can't read. On Tuesday, we will use responsive prayer 1 or 2. This is a switch from our last school year. You've got the Apostles' Creed and Lord's Prayer in there. We are also going to include the appointed Psalm of the week and chant it, or sing it according to a psalm melody, if your congregation doesn't like the word chant. The sermon is on the epistle lesson, and it's an opportunity to teach versicles and responses in a spoken service. On Wednesday, Matins, a sermon on the Holy Gospel, and we get to review the Te Deum. That 3-page Te Deum seems to be a little bit more of an ask for the youngest children, hence the classroom review. And then you've got the Benedictus for Advent and Lent. If you've ever sung it in the Lutheran hymnal 1941, you realize it's in an inhuman key. They dropped it 2 whole steps. I can sing it now. Thank God. Thursday is our catechesis day, service of prayer and preaching. Both canticles have refrains. They're easily teachable as opening and closing for Vacation Bible School. That's what we do. A catechetical sermon, you can pick parts of the catechism baked into service of prayer and preaching, or go to the catechism that's right there in the Lutheran service book, and you've got Luther's morning prayer available for you. On Friday afternoon, evening prayer, hence the move of morning prayer to matins, so we have bookends. This is at the end of the school day. We used to do this when I was all lonesome by myself at the end of Thursday to pray for Friday as testing day and my day off. Here's where you can use some of those extra readings that pop up, or your monthly sermon on the honor your father and mother commandment. The children love this, and when we rotate to other liturgies seasonally, we can also incorporate Vespers or Compline here. Which lectionary? This is a controversial question in the Wyoming district. I found a way to make everybody mad. I alternate. I do the 3-year for 3 years, and then I do the 1 year for 3 years. That's one way of making everybody in my circuit mad. And then I quote Nagel to them. Our Lord speaks, and we listen. His word bestows what it says. Faith that is born from what is heard acknowledges the gifts received with eager thankfulness and praise. Music is drawn into this thankfulness and praise, enlarging and elevating the adoration of our gracious giver, God. Saying back to him what he has said to us, we repeat what is most true and sure. So as your children imitate you, as they learn how to speak and think from you, it fits into this Lutheran theology of worship. The rhythm of our worship is from him to us, and then from us back to him. He gives his gifts, and together we receive and extol them. We build one another up as we speak to one another in psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs. This is an exemplar of why using materials that are true is important for your school. If you order from a Baptist publisher, and we thank the Lord that Baptists are Christians that confess Christ, how are they going to encourage a true teaching of baptism and vocation? It's not going to happen. If we import worship practices from other groups, it's going to put the focus on what we do for God rather than what God does from us. Lutherans are weird. Everybody agrees. In particular, what I mean by this is our theology of worship is different from everybody. Roman Catholic, Protestant, Charismatic, alike. So regarding chapel, start somewhere, improve your content, have chapel more often, visit, copy, model, teach what you know and learn more, and especially in chapel and in the classroom and in the home, teach what Lutherans know. The 3 books you've heard others at this podium in this room say, the Bible, the Catechism, and the hymnal, and keep at it. And add some Latin. We retain the Latin language on account of those who are learning and understand Latin, and we mingle with it German hymns in order that the people also may have something to learn, and by which faith and fear may be called forth. This custom has always existed in the churches. This is from the Apology, meaning defense, of the Augsburg Confession. There are some easy ways to add Latin to chapel. Classroom and chapel directions. Sedete, sergite, oremus, cantemus. And if you live in Wyoming, you might get to see a moose. Delayed reaction, every time. Sing the Lord's Prayer. There are mealtime prayers that we have from our very first year, 2003, that over the years, the children have talked to one another. It's kept it alive. That and Dona Nobis Pacem too, grant us peace. Work toward adding some liturgy and hymns in Latin. This is particularly fun for us when we go Christmas caroling or Easter caroling, because we get too many requests now to do all during Advent, and we need to respect some service times and family times. Adeste Fidelis. You can teach this and also teach people who Bing Crosby is. Arx firma Deus noster est. I don't tell children who did the translation in 1830. It was Buttman. A mighty fortress is our God, in Latin. Yeah. You also have Liber Hymnorum from Emmanuel Press, the Latin hymns of the Lutheran Church. First section in English, the second section, everything in Latin. And we have our own supplement that we update every couple of years. It now has Matins and Evening Prayer with LSB music from Lutheran Service Builder in Latin. That's been fun to use over the years. We've also translated some prayers or found translations of prayers or original versions from which we have translated our prayers into English. There's an entire list of hymns in Lutheran Service Book, Hymnal Supplement 98, the Lutheran Hymnal, and others that have Latin as original sources. Every couple of years, we add another one on a seasonal basis, and eventually we'll have to go to other sources. Any questions on chapel so far? Please.
When I was a little kid going to Lutheran grade school in Chicago, this was back in the days of TLH, I'd be sitting there in the pew and I would just thumbing through the Psalms. This is when I first got intrigued with Latin. So above Psalm 1, it'd say Beatus Vir.
Yeah.
Or Psalm 130, De Profundis. And I was wondering, what are all these funny words? And that was my first exposure to Latin.
Right. The liturgy does that to a guy. I remember the Sanctus, Agnus Dei, Agnus Dei, however that works. I remember looking through TLH, trying to find the longest hymn in the book, and then begging Pastor to sing it. And then that one Good Friday he did, that 21 stanza marvel. I've done it twice now. Let's change gears just a little bit. There's a variety of folks in the room. Some of you have heard my sections on chapel and Latin in chapel, 3 times now? Some of you, this is your first CCLE. We're in different places, but we're all learning. So think about what your goal is. Again, I can make these PowerPoint slides done once I fixed the typos that I've noticed again after the conference. We hope to, on our comprehensive media page, have everything arranged by topic, and then have the higher priority ones closer to the top of individual sections, a link to the YouTube video, which is being made right now, and then handouts as we have them available. Complete your own formal education if you still have the opportunity, if you're young enough. Get her done. This is a very practical session. Continue your own lifelong learning. One of the best things the Wyoming District ever did in its pastor salary guidelines, they increased the book budget. It went from $700 one year to $2,000 the next year. Deo gratia. Teach your own children. You may have folks, shorter ones, in your own household you can practice on. You can start a school from scratch. That may be another goal. You may wish to expand your school. Add additional things that you believe are essential, or add grades. Martin Luther Grammar School finally permanently added 6th grade, and then 7th grade, and then 8th grade. And then we decided, is it really Martin Luther Grammar School if you're 6th, 7th, and 8th grade? So we invented Emmanuel Academy. Sounds pretty cool. Maybe you want to transition your school to classical. At CCLE, we get emails about this almost every week. And a lot of folks are looking for the pastor as headmaster model. There's not many of us, and I don't tell my congregation about every time somebody says a divine feeler. Are you open to maybe possibly someday considering a... So, starting, expanding, converting. Focus on your Lutheran identity. This is a near direct quote from a dissatisfied parent of a typical LCMS school. Note I didn't say traditional, because I would argue that there's more tradition behind us than what a typical LCMS school is doing right now. Being just as good as the other educational options in town is not good enough. It's not. Why should somebody pay tuition for that? It's a lot of work to run a school, right? The second point comes from some folks who visited a variety of classical, air quotes, Christian, second set of air quotes, school, before they start their new classical Lutheran school. Pastor Cain, mere Christianity is not adequate enough. They disagree about too much within the faculty. It's like listening to Christian radio. Trying to please everyone actually pleases no one. So, be authentic. Be faithful to the scriptures. Focus on your Lutheran Christian identity. There's a town in my region, they already had a Lutheran school. It had been there forever. They have a beautiful church, a beautiful campus. I don't like that word, but I guess we're stuck with that word unless you can teach me a better one. Another congregation decided to start a classical Lutheran school in the same town. You know what happened at that other school? They upped their game. They became more authentically Lutheran. They got free copies of the handbook and the curriculum resource guide. The typical LCMS school. So focus on who we are, Lutherans, who are Christians for a reason. Say you're starting from scratch. That may be the case for some of you or people that are watching. look for CCLE schools in your district. In Wyoming district, we have 5 grammar schools. All are classical. 2 converted back, I think would almost be accurate, especially in the case of the oldest one in the district. 2 were, and the others were started as classical. There's great joy there. To have your district president tell your district ed exec, yeah, go for it. And now, the Wyoming district is sending their ed exec to synod things. I get to vote as an NLSA commissioner next week for the schools that CCLE accredited officially with the plaque this week. There's great joy in that. Visit a school. I mentioned that one already, but yeah, do it. It's totally worth it. Even if you have one, I've learned all kinds of things walking around this building twice now. I was here in January for our face-to-face. Every CCLE board member and some of the headmasters or principals of our schools have been trained as Genesis consultants. What does this mean? LCMS Synod has a how to start a school consultation process. Hopefully it will get revised. But if you ask one of us to do it, we'll give you the classical take on it. It comes from the 80s. Honestly, it's outdated, and there were some things that we thought should be updated. One of the homework assignments during the training is to contact your Lutheran Church Extension Fund regional vice president, get your demographic study, and do your homework on that. Well, we had a lunch hour. I emailed the fellow back in Casper, Wyoming. He had the details to me before lunch was over. We had actual data. And then the consensus of the room was from the trainers, oh, you're starting a classical school. Demographics don't matter if you've got the families ready to go. Talk with us. I'd encourage working toward congregational consensus because the congregation will need to live with this decision for a long time. And eventually, instead of being a congregation with that school, you become a congregation with that school. Partnerships within the circuit may be worth considering. I am 38 minutes from the closest church to me. The one to the north is an hour. The one to the west and the other ones to the west are 2 hours over a mountain range. And the one to the east is an hour and a half, and you have to go to the church to the south to get over there. We're kind of in an island, and it feels like that sometime. Some schools have started with preschool, and I understand there are differences in opinion on whether that is a good idea. We had the initial goal of trying to add a grade per year, and then we had to stop and focus and maintain on what we did well as a multi-level school. Kindergarten through 5th, 2 teachers, 2 classrooms, multiple levels in the same class. If you're one of the substitute teachers, hi, that's a little pressure. But I loved math. True story, the week before our accreditation visit in April, one of our teachers needed to be away for a family emergency for a week. I got to teach 3 days in a row. You know how long it's been since I got to do that much in a row as a sub, as the administrator? The first day, oh, it's the headmaster. You could hear a pin drop all day. Then Monday was, just a little poking at the bear. By Wednesday, they were completely themselves, which is still very restrained, the way Pastor Castellero runs his classroom very well. And then there was the follow-up the next month when I got to teach math. I prepared my lessons. I went through, I even looked at the recommended scripts and then tried to remember everything so I could just walk up with a marker in the color of the textbook and do the different levels on different marker boards. Oh, Pastor Cain, we did that yesterday. Well, I'm not going to review. You mean I get to use my math major today? Awesome. Okay, on to the next lesson. Somebody tell me what the problem... And then we just went with it. And it was so fun. We were talking about compound sentences in grammar. And the Latin homework had a little bit of Caesar. Veni, vidi, vici. Ooh. You can do some of this together. I recommend the same priorities that President Hill, then Pastor Hill, as education exec recommended. Focus on students, then staff, then structures. That's what you want to have in place before you expand more. You don't always have to be continually getting larger and larger and larger. Sometimes small is okay. And sometimes a contraction for the right reason, because the parent didn't like how you're teaching her daughter to make the number 2, is okay. Build from the lower grades up. We had 2 schools in Sheridan fail before we started. We eventually inherited the red grade library. It's in the basement now. Financial infrastructure is important, and you can also expand what your faculty knows with presentations, conferences, and continuing education. Would you like to hold a regional one-day workshop, a CCLE one? Let us know. We'll come. It'd be fun. Let me tell you a little bit more about my school, and then I'd like to wrap up with some thoughts and take some additional questions. There's no way we could cover everything of how all this fits together in 45 minutes. We just can't. So let's continue building relationships with one another and email questions, Facebook Messenger your questions, call us up, send us a letter. The rest are faster, but we still do snail mail. Martin Luther Grammar School is classical, which means that we follow the trivium method of teaching. We are Christian. We will teach the classic doctrines of Christianity as defined by the great reformers, especially Luther. I am a Lutheran because I am a Christian, and I want the full bore Christianity, both barrels. Martin Luther Grammar School is rigorous. We don't do social promotion. Classical education teaches the next generation what most people thought we're already teaching them in a Lutheran school. Classical education supplies the furniture of the mind, if that sounds like Dr. Tallman, that's because it is, needed to embrace a faith worldview grounded in, this is most certainly true, a sacramental Christian viewpoint and faith grounded in the Lutheran confessions. Were you a little surprised how Pastor Paul was talking about what parts of the Book of Concord were taught to 8th graders? We've gotten to the point in Sheridan where I get the 8th graders. I'm going to be selfish, and I'm going to have them all to myself. We read through, word for word, the large catechism. Why? 8th graders love sarcasm. They're natural Lutherans. And in paragraph number 1, there's already sarcasm. It totally avoids the problem that I just hated. But I've already done this. If there's at least 1 or 2 new vocabulary words per paragraph, they're not going to say that anymore. Classical education is not a passing fad, but a return to our roots. That's something as CCLE and the conferences expand and other people want to hear more about us, we don't just want to be the cool kids. We need to keep the same substance. Classical ed in the Lutheran school is more than just an appeal to a niche market to survive. This is not a quick fix, right? This takes a while to get acclimated to. Classical Lutheran education is an opportunity to believe, teach, and confess who we are as Lutheran Christians.